Okay, so let's say that now we've got all this other stuff set up. We want to add some content that looks nice and fits sort of side by side with this wing image, even whenever it scales. Well, we need to go ahead and add the content in the HTML. So let's go over to Komodo Edit real quick and let's just add some information in the actual HTML file. Okay, so where it's got this paragraph, I'm going to get rid of this, and instead I'm going to create a section, right? And we've talked about what sections and articles are like, and that actually is semantic, and a section tells you that it's going to be a section. But if I want to give it a specific ID, I can tell it that it's going to be the content section, and then that way I can style it specifically if I need to. Alright, and I'll end the section. And then I'm going to put some articles in there. So let's say that we want to have some feature articles in there. Well, let's go ahead and make ourselves some sections with articles. And I'll end the article. And inside of the article, let's say that I'm also going to have some paragraph text. And we'll end the paragraph text. Okay, and the other thing too that I could do is, I don't know what the images are going to be just yet, but I could go ahead and I could say IMG, and I could go ahead and put my source in there, and I'll just put an empty source for right now, and I'll put an empty alt text in there as well. And then that way what I can do is I can just copy this article like this and copy it, and then I can go ahead and paste it, and now I've got two articles, or at least the shells of them. And oh, the other thing that I forgot to do, should have done this first, is I want to have an H2. Okay, I've already got an H1 for the page, so I'm going to go ahead and do an H2. And I should have done this a minute ago, but I wasn't thinking about it, so there. So now we've got two exactly identical pieces of information for the different articles, and let's say that the first one is going to be called, I think what I called it in the example before was hip trips or something like that. So this is going to be like a vacation kind of website or something. Alright, and then the other one, I think I called it cool destinations. So let's say that, and then if we want to have some paragraph text, what I'm going to go ahead and do is over here in my web browser, I went to the Lorem Ipsum website that generates the Lorem Ipsum code, and it's www.lipsum.com, and then you can generate some text, dummy text. So I'm going to just take like maybe this paragraph here, and I'll copy that and I'll put it in my first paragraph right there, and then maybe for the second one, maybe I'll actually have two separate paragraphs. So I'll copy those tags and I'll put two separate paragraphs, and I'll make them a little bit shorter. So let's take this one and I'll paste it right here. Oops, can't seem to select it. And then I'll take the other short one, which is right here. I'll copy it and then I'll paste it in the second paragraph. Okay, so this is what we've got so far. I'm just going to go ahead and save this, and we can do a refresh over here, and you can see what's happening is it automatically fills everything up. But we can go ahead and change the styling on that in pretty short order. We can come down to the bottom and we can make a new rule for the article, which we have a couple of at least. So let's go ahead and say that we want the width of it to be like 40%. Okay, and let's go ahead and just save that and see what that does. You refresh it and automatically it makes it smaller. And what would be nice if it's, actually scooted over so that it kind of lines up a little bit more with the J, but it doesn't really interfere with the airplane. So let's go back and let's adjust the margins on it. Alright, now I've shown you guys some shorthand for margin where you can have it like top and bottom and then left and right, so you have two positions, but I don't think I've shown you how you can have three positions. So let's say that we want the top to be different from the bottom, but we want the left and right to be the same, but we still want to use shorthand. Well, that's 3 positions. So the top comes first, then the middle would be left and right, and then the bottom would come last. So let's say that we want to maybe do 0 for the top margin, okay? And then let's say that we want to have maybe 10% of the screen for the left and right, and then maybe about 5% or so for the bottom. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that, and let's see what happens. And that kind of looks pretty good. It lines up just inside of the J, which is kind of nice. And when we scale it, it still doesn't really come too close to the airline. If you wanted, you could even make it a little bit wider, but let's see what happens when we start giving it like some background color. So let's do background, and then we're going to say, in this case, let's do a transparency, kind of like what we've been doing. We'll do RGBA, which I've shown you how to do before. And inside, remember, we've got red at maximum 255, and then we can put maximum of green at 255 and maximum of blue at 255, and that basically gives us white. And then the fourth would be the alpha transparency. So let's say that we're going to do it at maybe 0.45%. Save that, refresh, and here's what we've got. Now you can see that maybe we need some extra padding, which is going to push it over here a little bit more. So maybe we don't want to jump the gun and add this to the width to make it wider. So let's go ahead and let's add our padding in here. Okay, and let's say that we want to do something like top would be maybe 3%, maybe left and right would be 5%, and maybe the bottom somewhere around 5%. Let's just try that. And we're going to save it, and then let's do a refresh. And then you see it starts to look a little bit better and sort of a little bit more put together. And you can see now that the margin between the left here and then next to the jet, it's kind of a good margin. It's still inside of the right spacing, and it kind of doesn't feel too tight. It works out okay. So maybe something else that we could look at then is, so that we've got this really rounded text and we've got these little circles in the background, maybe what we should look at doing is making the border radius of these boxes much greater. Right now it's nothing. So what we can do to the article is we can add a rule that's called border radius. Let's see, like that, and it has all of these pieces of information. You can read this, it helps you with your prompts, but basically let's just maybe say somewhere around, I don't know, 40 pixels, something like that, and let's save that. You could also try to do it in M's as well, and that's what this is going to do, is it's going to round all 4 of the corners. So let's do a test and refresh it, and you see now you've got some rounded corners, which is good. Okay. And you can adjust these. This is about right, you know, if you wanted to look at approximately what this radius. It's a little bit of a tighter radius than these circles, but the circles, I think if you were to actually match the radius, it would be way too high of a radius. I don't think it would actually look good. It would look too round. Okay, and so, you know, maybe something else that you would want to look at doing is going ahead and putting some images inside of there. And right now I'm going to leave the CSS and go back here. Let's save this and let's go back to the index, and we've got these images, and I've already downloaded some images that that I thought were, you know, some just really simple pictures to use as examples. And if you were to look inside of my image folder, my images folder, you would see one called destination.jpg and one called hiptrip.jpg. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead in my image source and I'm going to put the path to those. So it would be images, and then this one would be hiptrip.jpg, and then down here this one would be images, and it would be destination.jpg. And I need to give both of these some alt text. So this picture, if you were to look at this picture for Hip Trip, it looks like some kind of beach resort picture. So we'll call it beach resort bed or something like that, or beach resort room, something like that, balcony, something. And then this other one, if you were to look at it, oops, not that one, it is of a waterfall. So we're going to say tropical waterfall. Okay. And basically the alternative text is going to describe what's in the image. So let's save that and let's see what happens. We hit refresh. Well, the pictures kind of stick out of their container because they're actually bigger than the container. And like I showed you up here with the heading, an image will show all of itself unless you specifically set it up to scale. So let's go back and let's look at our CSS, or first let's look at the HTML. Notice that the IMG is already inside of something called article. Well, we've already, if you look at the CSS, we've already given the article a fixed width. I mean, it's percentage, so it's not technically fixed. It's not an absolute, it's a relative width, but specifically it is a width that is going to be set by the viewport size. Okay, so what we can go ahead and do is we could say article IMG, so any image that's inside of an article, we can go ahead and tell it width, and let's say 100%. And what it's going to do is it's going to take only 100% of its parent container. It's not going to take up all of the space that it can anymore. It's only going to take up 100% of its parent now. So the other thing that's important, remember I said before about IMGs, is that you need to say display block. Okay? Otherwise this width is not going to work in all browsers. So let's hit save. Let's refresh it again, and now you see the picture fits nicely inside of its parent container. Now, the thing that is a problem for me visually is that I've got these rounded corners here, but not on the picture. So what we can do is we can go back in here, and I'm just going to copy this border radius. I'm going to copy it and I'm going to put it on the image. And so instead of having to actually modify the actual image and put some kind of transparency, rounded corners on it, I'm just going to tell the IMG itself to have a border radius. 40 is probably too high, and I'll show you. I'll go ahead and save that and I'll hit refresh. And I think that that's a little bit too bulbous. It's a little bit too round. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change that to maybe somewhere in the ballpark of 15 pixels. Let's save that and see. Okay, that's a little bit better. So you can make the decision. You might want to even go a little bit higher than that, maybe somewhere in the ballpark of 18% or 20 even. Okay, and then that's, I think, a little bit better. So you can make the adjustments as you see fit, and then you're pretty good